Afternoon. Thank you so much for joining our Queen's Forum on the Path to Ranked Choice Voting, the first virtual event in a 5-part series bringing together policymakers, leaders from government, advocacy professionals, academia, media, technology, and more. I'm Zach Williams, staff reporter at City and State. Thanks so much for joining again. Before we jump into the main event, I would like to thank our great events team and our great sponsor, Spectrum, for putting together this great event. In lieu of audience applause, I'll just give a few claps right here. It's an exciting time, right? The upcoming election cycle is the first in the city to use ranked choice voting, which is already changing how candidates campaign for elective office in the city. We got a diverse group of experts to unpack how ranked choice voting works and what it means moving forward as the 2021 mayoral race heats up. But first, Alex Camarda, the Director of Government Affairs at Spectrum, has a few words to say to start things off. Alex?
Thank you, Zach. It's an honor to be here as part of this important event today. And in particular, I'm proud to represent Charter Communications, also known as Spectrum, as the sponsor of this event. Charter makes information available to its customers through connectivity to the internet, cable TV programming, and through its news stations like New York One. Charter plays an essential role in ensuring New Yorkers of the latest news impacting their city. Critical to a vibrant democracy is an informed public, and that is especially true when the procedures for people to exercise their vote are changing. As Zach mentioned, in 2021, a new form of voting went into effect in New York City. Ranked choice voting, also known as instant runoff voting. Ranked choice voting is probably something the typical New Yorker is not familiar with, but consistent with Charter's role as an information provider, we felt it was important to sponsor these forums with City and State so New Yorkers are aware of this new voting procedure for the upcoming mayoral election and the special elections that precede it. Like anything else in New York, this new voting procedure has its proponents and its critics. The issues surrounding it are complex. How will it change the voting experience? How will it change how votes are tabulated? How will campaigns for office be impacted? Who will be advantaged or disadvantaged? Charter and City and State have assembled a diverse and knowledgeable group today, including candidates, to discuss these and other elements of ranked choice voting. And I'm happy to say the panel discussion will be moderated by Spectrum's own Cheryl Wills, reporter, anchor, and host of New York One Spectrum News. For our part, Spectrum is pleased to help bring this discussion to the forefront, particularly here in Queens, and we will be sponsoring similar panel discussions in the coming weeks in each of the 4 other boroughs. We are a part of the community here. Our offices are here. A vast majority of our employees live in the communities we serve, and we are continually investing in the local community. Thank you again for being here for this important event, and I'll turn it back to Zach.
Thanks so much, Alex. Well, he took a little bit of my thunder. He revealed our great guide for today's event, someone that's going to hold a few feet to the fire and help us get some great takeaways. You can see her looming across the Manhattan skyline already, at least virtually. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Cheryl Wills, host of In Focus with Cheryl Wills at Spectrum News.
Zach, thank you for that. I'm so glad everyone is here. This is a very important topic, as you all know. This is a first for New York City. It won't be the last. But since it's the first, there's a lot that we don't know, and our aim is to inform you. We want to begin, though, with 2 mayoral candidates that we have with us today. We're so pleased to have Kathryn Garcia with us, and she is a former commissioner, of course, and let's get right to it. We are going to do some quick interviews, and then with Kathryn, and then with Sean, and then we're going to get right to the panel. So, Ms. Garcia, appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to see you. And let's get right to ranked choice voting. In your view, what are some of the pros and cons of this new voting procedure, at least for New Yorkers?
Ranked choice allows a diversity of candidates, and it means that whoever wins will have been voted on by a majority of New Yorkers. And it helps to ensure that we don't split and have a spoiler candidate in the race. And for the candidates themselves, I hope that it means that we are all running positive policy issued races.
Yeah, do you see any potential drawbacks to this?
I really don't. I think it gives New Yorkers, it means a majority of our voters will be voting for the next mayor. And that's critical. That's critical because it is going to be an extraordinarily hard job. You need to have a mandate.
How do we inform voters? This obviously voters put this forth and approved it, but I think it's safe to say that a great many people do not exactly know how this works. So how should we inform the New York electorate?
This is going to be a partnership between the media and the candidates and the campaigns to ensure that New Yorkers understand. But it's pretty straightforward. You're going to rank your choices 1 to 5. And we do that every day in all of our decisions. Do we like chocolate more than vanilla ice cream? That is just one example, but we rank all the time. I know that New Yorkers can rank their candidates.
And how do you expect this could affect campaigning? It's going to get very intense between now and the primary. How will that affect? Do you think there'll be less negative campaigning or just the same?
We are running a very positive issues campaign. And I believe that this is what New Yorkers want to see. They're worried about the future. They're worried about what's going to happen with the economy. They need to know that there is someone who can get things done, and that's me. But I do think that ranked choice means you gotta be running across the whole city and making sure that everyone gets to know you.
And finally, what about coalition campaigning? Will it help or hurt?
I think that it could help. I don't think we exactly know how it will roll out. But building coalitions is always important in the city of New York.
Okay, Kathryn Garcia, good luck to you, mayoral candidate, Democratic mayoral candidate for the city of New York. Appreciate your time.
Great to be with you.
Okay, next we're going to switch to Sean Donovan. Mr. Donovan, thank you for being here, mayoral candidate.
It's great to see you, Cheryl. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I want to really pose the very same questions to you. What do you see as some of the pros and cons of ranked choice voting?
Well, Cheryl, I've looked around the country at how ranked choice voting has worked, reached out to mayors and others who've been elected under it. And what I've found is that there are really 3 big advantages. First, more people vote because they think their vote matters more. And democracy is a good thing. More people voting is a good thing. Second, you see more positive, optimistic campaigns, because if you go negative in a campaign, you might hurt the person you're attacking, but you actually hurt yourself too. You might drop from second or third choice completely off somebody's list. So I think that's a good thing too. The third thing you see is that folks have to run citywide. You can't just target a narrow base of voters and ignore the rest of the city. You have to get to at least 50%. And that means you're going to have candidates going all over the city, trying to really build broader coalitions. And I think that's a good thing too. So I see that this is really a positive thing for New York City. And I'm excited that we're leading the way on it.
What about the potential drawbacks like vote splitting?
Well, what I've seen and just reached out, for example, to London Breed in San Francisco. The 4 Bay Area cities have been leading the way on ranked choice voting. They were the first to really implement it. What we've seen there is that we've gone from about 1/3 candidates of color winning to 2/3 candidates of color. And in fact, London Breed herself is the first African-American woman ever to lead the city of San Francisco. So I think we're really seeing that this can be a very positive thing, particularly to get more diversity and a broader set of choices. The one real thing I think we need to focus on, which is why I'm so glad to be with you today, is educating folks. We need voters to understand how ranked choice works and to get them the help and the information they need to use it to the full advantage.
Yeah, and that was my next question. And what's the best way to do that, especially in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, you are a great person that people listen to, that we want to make sure all of Queens and the whole city really knows about this. Today, I released videos in Spanish and English to educate folks. And I'm extremely excited that we've seen a proposal put forth by Council Member Alika Ampry-Samuel to put real money into an education campaign. You know, I was deeply involved in educating New Yorkers about the census and making sure we're all counted. We need to do exactly the same thing for ranked choice voting. And I think the council member's been a real leader here on this.
Yeah, and you touched on this a bit in your earlier comment. Do you think this will reduce negative campaigning?
Well, that's certainly what's happened in other places that have used it. And that's certainly the kind of campaign I'm going to be running. I'm running the campaign of ideas. We have the deepest and broadest vision for the future of the city. And that's the kind of campaign particularly at a moment like this, when the city needs to emerge from crisis, that we're going to want to see in New York. And I've talked to hundreds and thousands of New Yorkers across this city. That's what they're hungry for, is a campaign based on ideas and vision, not on negative attacks.
And I asked Ms. Garcia this. I want to ask you, would you be open to coalition campaigning?
Well, certainly I have been excited by what I've heard from many of the other candidates. I think it will be important at some point to start building those coalitions. But I'll tell you, Cheryl, the coalitions I'm focused on right now are building alliances and building on my relationships with leaders like Reverend Johnny Ray Youngblood and so many other community grassroots leaders around this city, and building on my relationships with President Obama, President Biden, over my work in 8 years of the cabinet as housing secretary and as budget director over the $4 trillion federal budget during all 8 years of the Obama-Biden administration. Those are the relationships I'm focused on right now and the coalitions I'm building.
Okay. Sean Donovan, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Obama administration. We appreciate you and grateful for your time. Good luck to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Big elbow bump to you and all the viewers out there.
One day we will see each other in person, I hope. Okay.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, so those are two of the mayoral candidates. As you all know, it's a crowded field and there will be more to come. Right now, we're going to transition to our panel to really do a deep dive into ranked choice voting. Like we all know, this is new to New York City, new to the state. And anytime something's new, you know, we have to tread lightly because there will be a learning curve. So we want to now do a deep dive, and we have a very powerful panel assembled. Donovan Richards is the newly elected Queensborough president. We're so glad he's here with us today. Wayne Ho is the president and CEO of the Chinese American Planning Council. Alicia Hindman is the New York State Assembly member representing District 29 in Queens. And Eric Friedman is the Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs, the New York City Campaign Board. Welcome, one and all. Let's get right to it. I want to start with you, Mr. Borough President, because I think Queens has tested this out first.
Yeah. We're making history. I don't know if it's good or bad.
Making history with that
We'll see if they can count the votes quick enough.
Well, and herein, and you know, there's some breaking news. Counting the votes, this is an issue, and now the Board of Elections is involved. So you guys were sort of the test run for this. Tell us how it went.
Well, it's still ongoing now, and it'll be interesting to see how the Board of Election actually wades through this. And, you know, just coming off of my election, where it took, I think, nearly a month or two just to count the votes, it's going to be interesting to see if the software that the Board of Election gets will enable us to get those numbers faster. You know, there's nothing like being a candidate and being in a waiting pattern. And we certainly experienced this. But overall, I was an early supporter of ranked choice voting. It is a good thing. You know, you should get to the majority, and it does require you to to work outside of your comfort zone. And anybody who's going to represent an entire borough or represent a community should be speaking to everyone in that specific community. So I look forward to the work ahead on it, but it's so far relatively going good. I think I was down out in Flushing today and got to hang out with a few folks who were already going to vote in that specific election. And it seems to be going good, but everybody's anxious to see what the vote count is going to look like. The other thing, and I'll just end in saying that the outreach needs to be ramped up more as we move ahead, but I'm sure we'll get into that discussion with the other panelists.
We certainly will be talking about the outreach ahead of the June primary, but I want to bring in Wayne Ho. You are a very popular figure in the Asian American community, and what are your concerns for this community, and especially in terms of outreach?
No, thank you very much for inviting me to be here with everyone. And I think outreach is key right now, not only because of the pandemic, but I see outreach actually as an opportunity. Asian Americans are the fastest growing population in New York City. They're the fastest to be naturalized of any racial group. They're the fastest to be registered voters of any racial group in New York City. But unfortunately, 2/3 of Asian voters actually do not hear from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They actually hear through community-based organizations. And that's why we need to make sure that the Campaign Finance Board, the Board of Elections is doing proactive outreach. That means properly translated materials, hiring interpreters, making sure there's education about ranked choice voting. And we need to make sure that all the materials are up to date and we can engage folks. But I think this is actually a great opportunity for any elected official right now with ranked choice voting, that the fastest growing population, that you have an opportunity of proactively reaching out to the Asian American community right now.
Okay, and someone put an interesting comment, and I just want to get this out up front. The ranked choice voting is only being used in primary elections, our primary in June. And that's an important point for everyone who's logged in to keep in mind. I want to go now to Assembly Member Alicia Heinzman. Assemblywoman, what are your concerns about ranked choice voting, especially what you've seen so far?
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. It's always great to see you. My concerns are what has already been said, is the outreach and educating the public about the importance of, it's hard enough to get people out to vote, let alone now educate New York City residents about how the process works. And I think as an elected official, we have to take the step in not only nominating or endorsing candidates, but we have to give 5 choices. We're telling people to go into the polling booth with ranked choice and make 5 choices. So while some of us, I haven't endorsed, I endorsed one candidate in the special that's going to take place later on in February, but I'm now going to make an announcement that I'm endorsing 5 candidates, because we're telling the public, you have to endorse, make 5 choices. So only as elected officials, we have to lead by example. And I think that's something that's being lost with this ranked choice voting that's going to take place next week. Taking place in early voting, but the culmination is next week. So I think education starts with us who are in elected office making those choices now, so the public knows that this is a totally different process coming up in these 2 special elections and in June.
So you broke a little news today. You said you're endorsing 5 candidates. What led you to that decision, Assembly Member?
Well, I think we're telling people to go into the voting booth and not just endorse one person, because the way the process works for ranked choice voting, the bottom candidate, if they don't have the number, the numbers go back in and go to the other candidate. So it only makes sense that if we're telling people go in there and make these choices, that we have to lead by example by doing exactly that. Saying that you have a number 1 choice, a number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, because you could go in there and your number 2 could be the person that wins. So it's really, this is the whole system that's been changed. I'm not on the city council, I'm a state member. It is very confusing for a lot of people. So we have to make sure that we're educating them by showing them this is what we're doing.
Well, we're going to get a little more education. The comments coming in are really invaluable. And I want to bring this to Mr. Eric Friedman. Someone put, and I believe they're right, it's not mandatory to rank candidates. Eric Friedman, Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs, New York City Campaign Finance Board. So you give us the official, is that true? It's, you do not, when you're in the voting booth, have to rank all five.
Thanks, Cheryl. And that is absolutely right. If your preference is to vote for one candidate, you can vote for one candidate. You can rank two candidates. You can rank up to five. I think why the message we want to get out to voters is that ranking five candidates gives you more opportunities for your vote to count.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, that's right. More opportunity, right?
I agree with everything that's been said about outreach and making sure that the word gets out. I mean, we've all just lived through what is hopefully a unique year, of threats to our elections, not just in New York, but all over the country. Watching voter suppression in other states, having to deal with these questions of whether folks look at the national election as something that's legitimate. I understand, the concern and hesitation around making changes to the process here in New York City. That's why it's so important, I think, for all of us to be working together to get the word out, do a ton of outreach, get into the communities and explain to voters not just the benefits, and I think we heard some of those earlier from the candidates, Cheryl, that you interviewed, but really how it works and how to navigate some of a lot of these questions that are coming up.
Yeah, and there are a lot of questions. I'm sorry, I just want to build on what you just said, Mr. Friedman. There are a lot of questions. For example, what if someone absolutely doesn't want a candidate to get a vote?
I wonder if I could ask you to.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at an excellent question here, and I know we're going to get to these later, but they're going to get so buried. I kind of want to work these in. Yeah. So they're saying they're very concerned that there will be lots of confusion. They're concerned that someone that nobody likes or is very unliked will get ranked. For example, I can think of someone I absolutely don't want for one of the races. I don't want them to get a vote. So do we have to rank, or can we just vote for the one person? So I think we know the answer to that now, right? Just vote for one person.
Well, look, I think what we're seeing as we go into this election, because term limits have created so many open seats, a lot of these races have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 candidates running. So, even if you rank five, there are opportunities to leave off the candidate that you don't like. I think like the scenario, I think that ranked choice voting helps avoid is candidates can't only win by appealing to a small but devoted base. I think Sean Donovan said this earlier, you need to reach beyond your base and really have a message that appeals to as many voters as possible. So some of these elections where, primary elections in past years where you may have had somebody who wins with 20% of the vote in a large field, going forward, the candidates who are going to be elected are candidates who appear on a majority of the ballots. That's why I think once you start explaining it to voters, hopefully they'll see that this is a system that it really allows for a more complete representation of the will of the voters and ensures that candidates are elected who better represent the people.
I just want to say real quick, you do understand that, in New York State, we just lowered the number of signatures required to even petition. On March 2nd, when petitioning starts, someone going through campaign finance, making sure that they've complied with all paperwork, now only needs a fraction of the numbers that they needed. So in some races now, there are 12 people who are running. It may increase because it's easier to get on the ballot now because of COVID. So while you're saying that now that we've, people can get a broader message out, apply to more than their base, it's easier to get on the ballot. So we're going into one of the races to, I think, in a neighboring district of mine, 12 people are already running. It can go to 20. And someone's going to go in there and look at all those names and rank them. So it is a confusing process, and to get the education out and during COVID is going to be even more challenging.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Mr. Borough President, since Queens is the first in the city to use ranked choice voting for this special election, give us an idea of what the ballots look like.
Oh, that's probably a better question for campaign finance. But you have, I wish I had an example here, but
I was secretly hoping you had.
yeah, I wish I had one.
Eric, do you have an example?
For instance, I think on this,
Give me I can pull one up if you give me a minute.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but
my concern, I think, and we've been doing a lot of education here. I've held 2 virtual trainings on this, and we've trained close to, I think, 200 people over the course of the last 2 weeks here at the borough president's office. But still, Queens has 2.4 million people. And I think the big challenge, even as we talk about changing this process up during COVID, and I know the Office of Civic Engagement is doing a lot. I know that they have some community partners. It's about making sure that even as we move along, that there's cultural competency, right? And I think that's to the point Wayne spoke to, right? And I think that the big concern right now is the communities that were hit hardest by COVID, right? There's always a common denominator. Communities that are disinvested in, are we really reaching them? And I think during this period, the challenges, and once again, I'm a firm supporter of ranked choice, is the challenge is how are you reaching those folks? And not everybody is going to be on the borough president's virtual ranked choice voting event. So I think, we have to make sure in the city and campaign finance board, Office of Civic Engagement, this is going to be a mail campaign, but even doing that for the average senior citizen who's going to go into the polls, they may get something in the mail and it just may confuse them. So the beauty is you can still just vote for one person, and that's great. But the point of ranked choice is for you to rank 5 people, right? So there are definitely some challenges, I think, around outreach. And, one of the things I've said at the trainings I'm doing is it has to be all hands on deck. Every organization, every tenant association, every civic association, every community-based organization should try to do their part. But I also just want to remind folks that during this period when our communities are being impacted the most during COVID, it's harder for some communities. So we're doing what we can, but it has to be an all hands on deck training going on.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned what Mr. Host said, because it was profound, and I want to follow up. You said that most candidates don't visit the Asian communities. And my question to you is, with ranked choice voting, do you feel candidates will feel more pressure now to venture into Asian American communities and get to know their constituents, opposed to just going through organizations like yours?
I think both needs to happen, but I think it's a great opportunity. The borough president mentioned that there's about over 2 million Queens residents. About 1 out of every 4 of them are Asian Americans, and they're diverse. It's not just Chinese, it's South Asian, it's Koreans, it's Filipinos. But I think what is key is that there is a way to do all hands on deck outreach. We saw it during the census efforts that the state and the city funded through community-based organizations, faith organizations, and others. We want to see it through the vaccine programs right now. But the reality is we, for example, at CPC, already have senior centers. We're doing Meals on Wheels programs. We continue to serve young people. We're doing citizenship classes. We have affordable housing. These are the populations who have normally been left out of a lot of elections. But this is, once again, a great opportunity, not just for the city, but for candidates to reach these community members. To do the education, I would encourage the Board of Elections and the Campaign Finance Board to update their materials, make it competent, translate them, and work through us as community-based organizations so we can educate our community members. On the other side, I encourage candidates that we want to hear more about your policy platforms. How are you going to incorporate the fastest growing racial group in New York City? Why should we vote for your policy platform? When you have ranked choice voting, whether you rank 1 person or 5 people, this is an opportunity to talk about policy issues, jobs, education, economic recovery, small business, public safety. These are all critical, not just for all New Yorkers, but for the Asian American community. We want to hear more about your ideas. So please reach out to us.
Quickly, Mr. Ho, why is it that you candidates do not visit Asian American communities in your view?
Now, I think that's a great question, and I'm actually wondering if either of the elected officials want to comment on that. I do want to acknowledge both elected officials here are actually really proactive in reaching out to their diverse constituents, but I think that's a great question. We have a governor who's never visited Chinatown once during all 3 of his terms. And we are the fastest growing group. We are the fastest growing group of voters, the fastest growing group of workers in the city and the state. So I think that please reach out to us in the proper language and learn more about our communities.
Okay. Assemblywoman, are you hoping that ranked choice voting will help increase diversity among candidates and those who will go on to hold elected office?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. It's just that, the example, the first ranked choice special election that's taking place is a more diverse part of Queens. The second one is in an area that's predominantly Black African American. So while you're saying increased diversity, there are more women that are running. I'm noticing, which I'm all, obviously, Cheryl, you know me, I'm 100% supportive of that. But in the areas where these elections are taking place, those communities are predominantly what they are. I don't think it increases the diversity of the candidates. I think that during COVID, it just so happens that this ranked choice voting is occurring. I just would have hoped it would have been delayed a year, but we can't do anything about that. But I don't think in parts of the city where certain communities are dominated that it increases diversity in the candidates.
Okay, and Mr. Friedman, do you have a picture of the ballot? Can we open his mic, please?
Sorry, yes, here I am.
Okay.
Let's see if I can share my screen. I didn't want to jump in the middle, but this is going to be the way that the ballot looks. This is for the Queens special election in District 24. So you can see you've got the list of names coming down the column on the left. You've got your columns to rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's pretty clean and straightforward. You see the line down there at the bottom where folks can write in a candidate if they want. But if I can advance here so we have a couple of graphics that kind of help kind of illustrate how, some things to avoid for voters as they rank their candidates. Voters should know that they should not rank more than one candidate. They shouldn't give more than one candidate the same rank. If you rank 2 candidates first, the machine won't be able to read your ballot. So it'll get knocked back and it'll be invalidated. The other kind of pitfall that we kind of let folks try to be aware of ahead of time, don't rank a candidate more than once. That doesn't help you. I think one way that I think was helpful for me to think about as I tried to understand how this works. You're ranking candidates, as many as 5 candidates, but each voter still gets 1 vote, right? If your first choice candidate ends up coming in last, your vote moves to someone else. And I think, as I said earlier, it gives you more opportunities for your vote to count. Whereas if the candidate that you vote for in a single choice election doesn't win, your vote doesn't count that same way. So with 5 candidates on your ballot, you get more opportunities for your vote to count.
And that's one of the questions I see here. Can you vote for one person 5 times? And the answer is?
Well, the answer is no, it doesn't help. It doesn't help that candidate. Voting for one candidate 5 times is the same as voting for one candidate.
Okay. And are candidates not listed alphabetically? Another good question.
Well, that's a I guess decision made at the Board of Elections, and that my understanding of it is that candidates are listed on the ballot in the order they submit their petitions. But I don't want to represent myself as the authority on that.
Sure. Yeah.
I would like to just say a few words about the outreach, because it's something that I know that folks have questions about. And, I think what I've heard described is, I think the approach that we've been taking, kind of an all hands on deck sort of approach to making sure that we are getting out into these communities, especially where the special elections are coming up. One of the things that we've been focusing on is a train the trainer approach. We run train the trainer sessions on Zoom twice a week. We've been reaching out to organizations really all over the city, but with a special focus in Queens, to kind of bring them in, make sure that they have the information to be able to communicate with their constituents. One of the silver linings of this past year, through the pandemic, is that we've really worked hard, to build these coalitions with, civic organizations, advocacy groups, neighborhood groups, City Hall, and elected officials to help get the word out about all of the changing rules and regulations around the way that we vote. So those relationships are forming the basis for the outreach we're performing this year. We're looking to build on it. And so, we've been talking to community leaders, here in Queens and all over the city to make sure that we get them the information that they need in order to communicate with their constituents. We've got mailers going out, in every district where there's a special election. Our voter guide that we've done for every election for the past 30 years, that is available in, English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Bengali. We'll have extensive information about ranked choice voting that's available to everyone. So I appreciate and understand, that folks are looking for more outreach. We're hopeful that the legislation passing the council today will help infuse even more resources into this effort. But the outreach is ongoing, and we're looking to do more.
Okay, and I have a ton of questions here coming in for you, but I really want to mix this up. Mr. Borough President, what are your concerns about voter turnout? You think ranked choice voting will help it? Because the turnout in this last one apparently was abysmally low.
I think the verdict is out, and I think this is an opportunity for us to explore something new. I think naturally we should see turnout increase a little bit, since they're like 50 candidates running for like every city council district. I would hope that they're talking to the voters in their communities, and that will certainly turn people out. And then obviously we have a mayoral election as well, the comptroller. And let me just also state that this only applies to municipal elections. So when when your state officials run, you're not even going to see ranked choice voting, on a part of their process. So this is for borough presidents, the mayor, the comptroller, and city council members. I don't know if district leaders apply. I think Erica probably, district leaders don't apply to this. So I think it goes back to the same concern. It's about making sure, one, that we're taking steps to reduce barriers for people to vote in the first place. This perhaps can be viewed as one strategy in achieving that. I think Eric spoke earlier about barriers we saw across the country and the South, things that were being put in place that inhibit especially communities of color from being able to maximize their vote. So this is just another tool in the toolbox. It's not going to be perfect. There are going to be kinks, and this is passed by charter referendum. So voters voted for, I think, 73%. So we have to move forward. I'm not really spending my time looking back in the rearview mirror at this point. It's about making sure you're educating and speaking to every voter. And as Wayne said, you have to speak to every voter. And we did that in the borough president's race. I could say that I'm proud that we did that, and we'll continue to do that. If you want to represent an entire community, you should speak to the entire community. Assembly
member, do you have any concerns about voters who may feel this is too much? I'm confused.
Absolutely. The governor was doing vaccinations in a senior building 2 weeks ago. The borough president was there. I stayed afterwards to see what was happening to seniors. Every apartment in that building was flyered. This is what you have to do. The seniors came downstairs confused.
Yep.
Not online, not listening, very upset. Yeah. This is and I'm worried about that. I have a heavy voter turnout district, one of the busiest in New York City. My community votes. I am concerned that during COVID, we will not get the word out, not be able to speak to every voter, not be able to make sure that everyone's on a Zoom, gets it in the mail. And if we're saying that this is ranked choice voting and you have 5 choices, I need to rephrase that. I'm not going to support 5 people, but if you're saying 1 to 2, go in there and vote for 1 person, then what was the point of ranked choice voting? I'm concerned that there will be confusion. We have people in the last election, last June, who didn't even flip the ballot over. We have new poll workers. We have poll workers who don't want to come out because they're worried about the risks of COVID. I just think that this needs to be delayed because if we're talking about enfranchising voters, I think that this is disenfranchising people because it's too much information. I'm not saying people can't grasp the information. I have a very well-informed community that will get the information, but there's a huge percentage of people who are not going to get this and will go there and be confused. And guess who they're going to blame? They're going to say the politicians are changing things again, and here they don't want. They're trying to take away my right to. I'm telling you, this is what is going to be said. So as much as we can, we'll educate, but I'm concerned that this is just too much, too fast, and that it is not going to achieve the desired effect.
Yeah. And Mr. Ho, do you share that concern, especially considering COVID, when you combine that with seniors who are already overwhelmed by all the things going on during the pandemic, and then you throw in this new ballot, and if there's a language barrier, what do you think that could mean for your constituents?
I think that we should not underestimate the intelligence of New Yorkers. I think we know we're resilient. I think that they want to opt in and be more democratically engaged. I do agree with the Assembly member that there are key concerns. Can we make sure that there's language access? Can we look at what other municipalities did with ranked choice voting? Some had different color ballots. Others had a lot more education materials weeks in advance. There were interpreters at the polls themselves. They didn't tell the voters how to vote, but they were making sure they could answer questions in language at the polls. But I think this is a question about what is the accountability of the Board of Elections? What is the accountability of the Campaign Finance Board to make sure that there is true outreach, true education, that ranked choice voting is for primary elections. It's not for the general election. What can we do to make sure that all voters are outreached to? Just a quick stat to the elected officials who are joining us is that there are about 1 million registered Asian American voters in New York. And if 2/3 are not outreached to, that's about over 600,000 possible voters to support you. So it's not just the Asian community. We know the Black communities, other immigrant communities, brown communities have not been as actively outreached to. So just think about the number of votes that you could capture if you were proactively outreaching as a candidate, as well as us making sure the Board of Elections follows through on best practices we've seen in other districts, because it does lead to more diversity, more policy discussions, and better turnout.
Mr. Friedman, will ballots, a question from our participants, will ballots be invalidated if filled in incorrectly? As we saw the example you put up of one candidate getting voted for 5 times, will it just be thrown out?
So, I mean, one of the things that, and this was somebody pointed out this to me in a conversation earlier today, there's a fail-safe in that the scanner, as you put your ballot in, should reject the ballot if you fill it out in a way that renders it invalid, and kick it back to you so that you can take it back and fill it out again. But I agree with what folks have said, that interaction at the poll site is going to be really important to ensuring that folks understand how to do that correctly. We know that the Board of Elections is the training of poll workers is ongoing. We've heard that they'll have materials available at every poll site, kind of one-pagers that help point out some of these pitfalls and help voters understand how to make sure that their vote is counted. So again, I think, that kind of last touch point before people cast their ballot is going to be really important. And we know that's something the Board of Elections is thinking about.
Yeah, thinking about, but these are good questions coming up. Someone else asked, will there be a report of all the invalidated ballots so that we know how many people have invalidated their ballots by filling it out correctly? That's a good point.
It's a good question, and
Yeah.
it's our hope that the Board of Elections will make that data available after the election. We've got a couple chances at this in these special elections. You know, we hope that they'll make that data available for us to look at, for other groups to look at, and review and make sure that, you know, we're doing this better every time out.
Yeah, and this is for any of the elected officials. Another great question here. I believe due to a lack of education to the community combined with the pandemic, there needs to be a postponement of ranked choice voting until 2022. Who determines a postponement? That's for anyone that can hop on that.
Well, this was done by charter, so I don't think you could just roll this back. I believe the state, I think I'm right, don't quote me, could pass a bill, but this was done by charter referendum. So voters voted on this. You spoke. It wasn't the politicians who passed this. It was done by charter referendum, and that was 73% of New Yorkers who actually passed it. So, you know, I think from my standpoint, you know, we just have to move forward at this point. I'm not seeing it happening. We have 2 elections, one for my prior seat on the council that will happen, I believe, February 24th as well. So I think there's enough time for us to look at these kinks, but I do agree. I'm not dismissing what the individual is saying, that there are a lot of challenges with this. And I'm definitely worried about, you know, even from a standpoint of cultural competency, once again, are we reaching the immigrant communities? Are we reaching this is such a diverse borough. Are we reaching the people we need to reach to really educate them on this process?
This is another great question for anyone who wants to jump on this. Most places that use ranked choice voting print different sets of ballots with the candidates in different order on the different sets. So the candidates at the top of the list don't have an advantage. And they ask, why isn't the New York City Board of Elections doing this, or will they do it? And that's actually,
I don't think any of us want to speak for the Board of Elections.
No.
I would not presume to speak for the Board of Elections. I don't believe that the charter, you know, the charter revision included provision to do kind of randomized ballot order on the ballot. So that, to my understanding, will work the way it's worked in the past.
right. And there's also many people are commenting about senior citizens. And so that leads to the question, will there be people at the polling places to really take the time to explain this to seniors who may be confused? Do we know if that is happening? Did that happen in the at all, borough president? Or
well, I mean, there are always poll workers there, and you know, and our poll workers are great. You know, these are individuals who volunteer, you know, their time. I would hope that the Board of Elections is really doing a real training with them to educate them on this new process as well, since they're going to be the ones at the polling sites, literally helping you put your ballot through the scanner. So it's a good question, and I would hope if the Board of Elections is listening, that's going to happen.
yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
Just the one thing I would add, I think, is what we've seen and heard when we've looked at other jurisdictions who've implemented ranked choice voting. It really is the kind of older population that needs the most education when it comes to switching to ranked choice voting. They've been voting in this old system the longest, and so they are used to these single choice elections, and need some extra attention when it comes to outreach and education. One of the great things about the bill that's coming out of the council today, it does include provision of sort of materials in large print, right? To help, you know, and to direct us to work with Department for the Aging to ensure that gets out to some of the senior population. So again, we're hopeful that, you know, the resources that we hope will come with this bill will help us kind of reach some of these areas that folks are you know, have been speaking about, where there might still be some concerns.
I mean, in terms of, if I may, in terms of on the ground experience, we serve the tens of thousands of seniors through CPC, and we got materials during census outreach. We got materials about PPE and safety guidelines. We're getting information about the vaccine, but we have yet to get any information around ranked choice voting from the Board of Elections. So if we haven't gotten it yet, I can't imagine just a regular senior who is not being served by a YMCA or a CPC or any of my colleagues in the community, because we haven't seen things at the libraries, we haven't seen things go through us who are trusted resources. And I hope that the Board of Elections gets moving really soon through their efforts.
Yeah, and here's another comment that's very important. And Mr. Friedman, I want you to confirm or deny this. Please tell people that they get 3 chances to fill out the ballot correctly. The scanner will reject any ballots with overvotes, and the voter takes the spoiled ballot back to the ED table, turns it in, and gets a new one. The poll workers keep careful track of how many ballots like this need to be replaced. And I think we addressed that, right?
Right. At the poll site, the poll
Right.
workers will they'll replace your ballot twice.
Right. And
That's right.
will mail-in ballots be available to seniors and others due to COVID-19?
Yes.
They will. Okay. And this is for anyone on the panel. Why is ranked choice voting only being used in the primary and not the general?
I mean, this is a very good question. And, you know, if it was considered, to my understanding, in the charter revision. One of the things about the general elections in New York is we have fusion voting. So one candidate can be listed on the ballot, you know, more than once on multiple party lines. You know, if you have a candidate who's running on the Republican line and the conservative line and the Independence Party line, you know, you could have the candidate's name listed 3 times. And so, you know, I believe the determination was, as they were writing up the rules for ranked choice voting, that this would end up being just more complicated than folks wanted to get.
Yeah.
So they, you know, as a result, they applied it just to the primaries and not to the general elections.
Yeah, and someone else is asking when will the ballots be mailed out for the June primary?
That's a good question. I know, and I wish I had the answer on the tip of my fingers. But you know, one of the way that I understand it, the provisions for mail-in ballots that were provided during 2020 as a result of the pandemic are going to continue through this year, because, you know, as we're all here on Zoom, this pandemic, you know, has not gone away. And one of the great things we had to look forward to this November, you know, no excuse absentee ballot will be on the ballot as a constitutional amendment for folks, and we'll have the opportunity to vote for that and ensure that it, you know, continues from here on out.
Right. And this is for anyone on the panel. Please tell us the counting details. I've heard there are many different ways to tally the votes. Different algorithms can be used with different results.
Well, I'll leave Eric to answer that part, but for this first special, they'll be hand counting these ballots. So
Right.
that's the big difference for this election, when obviously the Board of Elections is not ready. And just like Wayne said, the census information, when it was going out, we started before the census, during the census, when we had COVID, the information in all languages, we had census committees. That has not been the same with ranked choice voting. So I don't know if we'll be hand counting for February 23rd, but I think we'll be hand counting that. Eric, you can take the regular.
I want to just one quick second, Assembly Member, you make an excellent point. Does this show that we were not prepared for this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that a failure in leadership that all of a sudden we're hand counting? That wasn't the original plan, right?
No, but I think, you know, the Board of Elections had to wait for the State Board of Elections to make a determination, which today I believe their State Board of Elections has said yes, because New York City is a municipality out of the 62 counties within New York State. So New York City, as much as we're important, yes, but State Board of Elections also has to govern elections for the entire state of New York. And they were not ready for this rollout, especially because we have these special elections going on now. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. That's not what I'm doing.
So
Well,
the one thing I would add to that, I believe that with that approval, the Board of Elections is going to be able to use, that software to do
Yeah.
a computer count for this election
Yeah, that was in the.
District 24 coming up. I think they're going to have they may do a hand count to make sure that to confirm that it works the way they expect it to. But I don't think that folks will have to wait for the hand count to get the results.
We already
But
started.
in terms of the tabulation, so the first round of tabulation is actually pretty simple. Just to kind of walk through it briefly, if one candidate is listed on a majority, is ranked number one by a majority of the ballots, that candidate wins on the first round. If no candidate gets 50% of the plus one of those first choice votes, then counting ends up continuing in rounds. So in each round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. And then those ballots are distributed to those voters' second choice. And then once that process starts, it continues until there are only two candidates left. At that point, one candidate will have a clear majority and the winner is selected.
okay, and another point of clarification from a very astute viewer. They say the hand counting is because the State Board of Election did not certify the counting software, and that the New York City Board of Elections wanted to use. Blame it on the state, not New York City. I think that's a very important point to be drawn out here. I see a lot of people concerned about educating seniors. A lot of people are saying, and they're rightly pointing out, seniors are not on Zoom primarily. We don't want to underestimate the education of our voters, to Wayne Ho's point. But in reality, many seniors, especially low income, they are not on Zoom. They don't even have computers. Some of them don't even have smartphones. So there's more questions here about outreach, like airing these workshops on city access channels and radio stations. And that's for anyone on the panel to talk about how to reach seniors during a pandemic when they cannot leave home. And that, of course, is why some on this chat are saying, is there any way we can postpone this? Anyone can jump in.
I mean, I don't want to keep talking, but I mean, I've raised this same point with the Office of Civic Engagement as well. Are you going to do mail? Are you just targeting the usual suspects, right? Are you just going to put ads in the Daily News? But are you going to use more diverse sets of newspapers and TV channels to really try to reach the pockets of the borough or in the city, perhaps, who are not glued to New York One, which I am, and I'm usually New York One is on in the background in my office now, but not everybody has cable either, right? So this has to be all hands on deck again. I think the city's going to have to spend some money definitely on this campaign, and to not just spend money in the usual places, to really look at ethnic media, look at a diverse set of different organizations who can really get the word out about this.
Yeah, and here's a great question. Does the candidate with the fewest total votes or fewest number one votes get eliminated? That's for anyone on the panel who knows the answer.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Does the candidate with the fewest total of number one votes or fewest number one votes get eliminated?
Well, that's what would happen in that first round. And kind of that elimination goes round by round again until you get down to the final two.
And then someone else asks, so hypothetically, can a candidate win by receiving a majority of second place votes?
So again, there are two ways to win. One is the candidate receives 50% plus one of the first place votes on the first round. The other is to be named on a majority of the votes once that elimination starts. So once candidates get eliminated, it's the candidate who is basically the last one standing. whose name is on a majority of the ballots after the counting is done.
Okay, and
Someone said it was like Survivor in the chat. I saw that.
they're lighting the chat up, but that's good because it shows you the need for education, right, Assemblywoman? It shows that people really have a lot of questions. When do we know who wins for anyone on the panel? Do we find out election night on New York 1, or do we have another 2020 where we wait weeks?
So there,
2 months.
That's right.
there will be an unofficial count available on election night. However, the thing that we experienced in 2020 is still going to be an issue moving forward. The delay is not based on doing the tabulations for ranked choice voting, but on those absentee ballots. Vote by mail has become such a large part of voting in New York so quickly. And the law still requires that the Board of Elections wait to open those ballots until after the election. I know there's legislation in Albany, Assembly member, to, and maybe you can talk about this. There's legislation that would allow the Board of Elections to start counting those ballots sooner.
Right.
And if that moves forward, that will get us an official count more quickly. So they're not waiting, weeks for that final result. But really, that's where the delay is, not through that.
Yeah, should there be a special link? Is someone's asking, is there a link or a way to sign up to specifically train seniors and people in low-income communities? Is that in the works by anyone? Wayne,
yeah, you can go to, and I know the trainings, actually, and I will give credit to both CFB and the Office of Civic Engagement. The trainings that they've done over the course of the last 2 weeks with my office have been outstanding. You can go to https://rankthevotenyc.org. So rankthevotenyc.org. And the presentations were actually very good. I mean, even for me, there were some gaps at first, and I'm elected. As they went through the presentation, it simplified it a whole lot. So I think the visual is definitely helpful. I think it's a video as well.
Yes,
so you can go to that and you'll get some great information.
Yeah, and is anyone concerned here that the end result will ultimately not reflect the will of the people?
I wouldn't say that. The whole idea of civic engagement and voting, as we know, is like a bedrock of democracy. So I wouldn't want anyone to feel that. I would not adopt or encourage that attitude at all. I think I understand the processes behind why ranked choice voting is now what we are going to be using, but to feel like that we have if the person that you want to win doesn't win, that happens in elections anyway. I mean, we saw what happened in Washington, D.C., that those rioters wanted Trump to win and he didn't win. So, and look what happened. So I wouldn't want anyone to take that attitude. I think this used to exist, and Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but with school board elections back before Bloomberg changed it to community education councils, ranked choice voting did exist. Because I remember Robert Jackson talking about pick me number 2 for school board votes back then. So this has happened in New York City before.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Borough President, that link you mentioned, please type it into the Q&A. Some people are asking for it. Okay.
I'll put it up now. Yes.
Thank you. And here's an interesting question. Let's do a real life example. 5 candidates, Mary, Sue, Jerry, Felix, and Alex. No one gets 50%. Alice gets 39% and is the highest recipient in the first round. What happens next? Should I repeat that?
Well, if since I have the slides up, I would love to show you a quick visual if that's.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. All right. So I will, let's see, can you see that?
No, not yet.
All right. There we go. All right. So here's, so here's basically like a visual that we've created, and this is with the help of an organization called the Center for Civic Design that has helped with rolling out ranked choice voting in other jurisdictions around the country. And so here's just, again, just a quick visual of how votes get counted. So if a candidate gets 50% in that first round, that's the winner, candidate B. If no candidate gets that majority in the first round, then the rounds of elimination start. So in this example, that candidate D was the last place finisher with 12%. Those 12% are be distributed to the candidate who was listed second on each of those ballots. And so in that next round, here's that next round with those candidates' votes distributed among the remaining 3 candidates. So in this example, the candidate B, who started with 39%, is up to 45. So we go on to the next round. Candidate C is in third. Those votes will be distributed to the other 2 candidates, candidate A and candidate B. At which point, you see with 2 candidates left, candidate B gets the majority. And so, these are this is the kind of materials that we use in some of these presentations. The borough president mentioned those. He's been a great partner in helping us reach voters in Queens. We've been working with other elected officials around the borough, other organizations to help walk voters through this process, which I understand is a little much at first. I think once you walk through it, people get it.
Mr. Ho, as you know, we live in a very polarized country, and that includes New York City. Do you think ranked choice voting will create more polarization or less?
Hopefully from the research we've seen around the country, it actually creates less polarization, and there's actually more opportunities for candidates to cross-endorse each other or elected officials endorse others. For example, we just saw that Senator Gustavo Rivera endorsed both Scott Stringer and Diane Morales. And I think we've seen, we understand that there's fears and concerns and anxiety, and ranked choice voting passed in 2019. And I wonder what happened in the last 2 years to make sure that we all get up to speed on this. But we are here. And we have seen in other municipalities that use ranked choice voting that it creates candidates opportunities to talk more about policy issues, that there are more diverse candidates getting elected into elected office, that we have more opportunities for voters to learn about the candidates, and that honestly, that candidates run less dirty campaigns against each other. And I think that's something that everyone in New York City wants to see after how tiring and exhausting the last 4 years of our former president has been.
Assembly member, I'd like you to chime in on the polarization.
As Wayne was talking, I wondered, I think New York City is unique. I think sometimes what works in other places doesn't work here. And, I want to be an optimist. I'm just really, in this special election that's taking place now, I think this is a real test. And is this really going to work for New York City? Because if you go into the polls and you voted for, you ranked your persons, and the 4th person, the way the votes came in, your votes now, because of the system, go into someone else who you never intended to vote for. Whereas if in the old system, you would go in and vote, and if the person lost, they lost. But now your votes are being in a system that goes into for someone else. So I don't think that the city would be more polarized than it is. I think I don't want people to get disenchanted with voting or this new process, which is I hope that's not what people walk away with it, especially because we just have these 2 elections in Queens, and that's my concern.
Let's talk about name recognition and candidates with a big war chest. Do they have an advantage with ranked choice voting, or does this level the playing field for someone with high name recognition versus maybe a candidate that doesn't have high name recognition?
Well, if you look at this, the first race, again, in the 24th City Council District, one of the candidates was a former city council member. I'm sure people will know his name better than the other candidates that are running. I don't know how much money he's raised. I haven't been looking at CFB's numbers, but money still makes a difference if you're able to buy more mailers, more people, well, you can't do too much knocking on doors, but if you're able to get people to stand at supermarkets, to paper communities, money, all of that costs. And if you have a bigger war chest, I believe that will put you in a better position. On the state level, we don't have matching dollars, but on a city level, you do. You have candidates, the 8-to-1 match makes a difference for a candidate. And I did look early and I saw a lot of people had looks like a lot of people were making the matching numbers. So I think the city levels the playing field somewhat with the matching dollars, so that someone who's not using the matching dollars, I think in the mayor's race, one of the candidates doesn't have to do that. He's a millionaire, so it's easier for him. He has his own war chest, but for the candidates that need the matching dollars, I think it does help to level the playing field somewhat.
Okay, we're almost out of time. Mr. Friedman, there are requests of your wonderful slides. Are they available for the public to see?
Yes, they will. I will post a link. If I don't get it in time for the close of this, we'll try to make sure that we share it with the folks who are on the session here, if that's possible. Sorry?
I know Abney's doing a workshop soon, but there are a lot of workshops. But please share it with me so I can share it. Thank you.
For sure. And I've posted the link to sign up for those trainer sessions in the chat as well. So if folks want to come and we have about an hour-long version of this training that we deliver, that so the link to sign up for those is also in the chat there.
Okay. I have 3 minutes. Mr. Ho, you want to add anything else?
Quickly, I just want to thank everyone. But I think it's important that we have not just a ground game, but an air game. Online radio stations, ethnic media, television, ads on all the streaming services are great, but we need the ground game. We need folks safely to go door to door, floor to floor, store to store to educate people about ranked choice voting.
Okay. Assembly member, any final thoughts?
I would just say, like Wayne said, we need a all points bulletin regarding ranked choice voting, that voters don't feel disenfranchised when they go to the polls. Education is important, and I think I really wish in these 2 specials that we would have been able to get more information out to the public. This is COVID. It is a different time. If this wasn't COVID, it would be different, obviously, educating the public. But I am deeply concerned about these 2 specials that are happening, that not enough voter interaction will take place to inform these voters. And one of them is right in my district. So it is important to me.
Mr. Friedman, any final thoughts?
Only that I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be part of this conversation. I agree with everything that's been said. We're going to be working very hard over these coming weeks and months to ensure we get to as many voters as we can, so that they can vote with confidence in these elections, very important elections we have this year.
Very important indeed. And Mr. Borough President, I'll let you have the last word.
I think it's all been said today, but as my colleague said in the assembly, we have a race right in my backyard, which is for City Council District number 31 seat. And many of you may recall when I ran, there was a candidate that actually almost won. who was not necessarily representative and did not necessarily speak to the entire community. So that's one of the good benefits of ranked choice, is that you have to speak to every community through this process. But there's, like I said, still a lot more work to be done on educating the public, and I look forward to being a part of that as long as ranked choice voting is here.
Well, it was a thrill to be with everyone and to see the engagement of everyone in the audience. And I want to thank you all. I'll see you tonight at 10 o'clock on New York One Live at 10. Let's turn it back over to shameless plug, I know.
Oh, I watched.
I watched too. Yes, I do.
Shameless. I'm a New Yorker. I'm a Queens girl.
You're doing far. Rockaway. Rockaway's in the house. Far Rock.
What we do. We promote ourselves. Zach, I want to turn it back over to you. This was great. I learned a lot as well.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Some really great energy, although I wonder if we kept all of you guys together, how much trouble you might all get into. So many great insights into what RCV really means for the city moving forward. I would love to thank our very distinguished panel of experts for spending the time with us today. Great job, Cheryl, moderating. In lieu of audience applause, I'll give a little bit of a clap. Two things, though, to close things out. If you're a total nut about 2021 politics here in the city, then you got to sign up for my colleague Jeff Colton's newsletter, Campaign Confidential. You can find the sign up at cityandstateny.com. Must read if you're really trying to keep up with all the different city council and state and citywide elections this year. And then the last thing is, I think the big conclusion from this event is we got to talk more about ranked choice voting. And luckily, City and State is coming through with that. We're going to have our second installment of our 5-part series on ranked choice voting focused on the Bronx, and additional mayoral candidate interviews on Thursday, February 11th at 2 p.m. Registration's free, of course, and can be found in the chat. And if that can't come soon enough for you, then you got to join us for our New York City Power 100 webinar the day before on Tuesday, February 10th at 5 p.m. Registration's also free, and you can find the details in the chat. And one last event for us and our great events team to plug is Thursday, February 18th, which is our annual diversity summit. Big year for diversity issues, especially with the pandemic. You can sign up for that. It's at 1 p.m. Registration's free and in the chat. And one last shout out to our great moderators, our great panel of experts, our great moderator, Cheryl Wills, and our wonderful audience. Great energy. Let's keep the conversation going. I'm Zach Williams with City and State. I'll catch you next time.